Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to learn about the 요 form. Now, you're probably already familiar with the 요 form, but here's a quick review. In order to use a verb, it must first be conjugated from its dictionary form, and the dictionary form will be the form that ends with 다. The 요 form is the most common way that verbs are conjugated. For example, 가다 may become 가요, 하다 may become 해요, and 먹다 may become 먹어요. These are only a few examples of conjugation using the present tense and the 요 form. The 요 form is one part of what's known as 존댓말, polite speech. Now, 존댓말 is not only the 요 form, but also includes many types of speech that are related to speaking politely. To clarify this a bit, the 요 form is not simply just one set of rules for conjugating verbs a certain way. It just refers to the 요 at the end of that conjugation. For example, if we take the verb 하다, this can become 해요, but 해요 is not the only 요 form of 하다. If we take the past tense, we can also get 했어요. Or if we take the future tense, we could get 할 거예요. Or with honorific speech, we could get 하세요, 하셨어요 in the past tense, or 하실 거예요 in the future tense. And when used together with honorific speech, for example, the 요 form can be very polite, and we'll learn about how to use honorific speech in a later episode. So then, should I use the 요 form? Well, the standard 요 form, so without any honorific speech, like just saying 해요, is still considered a polite form in most situations. However, if used to close friends who are the same age as you or younger, it can sound awkward. So instead, you would want to use 반말, which is casual speech. Also, the standard 요 form can actually sound a bit impolite, even a bit too casual, when you're speaking about someone else who you're not close with. So this includes asking questions about someone else who you're not close with. For anyone who you would normally show extra respect toward, instead add honorific speech to the 요 form. This would include your teacher or your boss, strangers, and anyone who you want to show more respect toward. So then, can friends use the 요 form with each other? Well, yes, but most of the time it's preferred that the younger friend will speak more politely to the older friend, for example, using the 요 form, and the older friend will speak more casually toward the younger friend. But using this 요 form in this way can actually feel more comfortable for both people, even though it's a polite style of speaking. But then you might wonder, why would someone speak politely to a friend at all? Well, that's because the 요 form is more than just a polite ending. It also has a soft and respectful feel. In fact, even some couples may prefer to use the 요 form in this way, despite being in a close relationship. Note that this is less common. Next, let's talk about how to conjugate the 요 form. If you're already familiar with this, feel free to fast forward to the end of the lesson. For everyone else, here's a quick review. The first thing that you have to do to conjugate the 요 form in the present tense is to get a verb stem. Then you'll attach 아 if the verb stem ends with the vowel 아 or 오, or you'll attach 어 if it ends with any other vowel. And finally, attach 요. So the verb 좋다 becomes 좋아요, 앉다 becomes 앉아요, and 먹다 becomes 먹어요. If the verb stem ends with a vowel, so no consonants, then the 아 or 어 you add will combine into the final syllable, becoming one syllable. So the verb 가다 would become 가요, 보다 would become 봐요, and 마시다 would become 마셔요. As an extension to this rule, verb stems that end with the vowel 에 will simply attach 요. So 보내다 becomes 보내요. Next, if the verb stem ends with only the vowel remove it, and then look at the second to last syllable, and attach the vowel 아 or 어 as usual directly to the end. If there's only one syllable, just attach the vowel 어. And finally, attach 요. So the verb 잠그다 becomes 잠가요, 예쁘다 becomes 예뻐요, and 쓰다 becomes 써요. If the verb stem ends with the syllable 르, first remove the vowel then attach another lir to the bottom of the second to last syllable. Then, looking at the second to last syllable, attach the vowel a or 어 as usual directly to the end. And finally attach 요. So the verb 모르다 would become 몰라요. And the verb 부르다 would become 불러요. Whenever the verb stem ends with the consonant piup, most of the time, here's what you do. Remove the piup, attach the syllable u, and then attach the syllable 어 and combine it with u. And finally attach 요. So the verb 맵다 would become 매워요, 춥다 would become 추워요, and 부럽다 would become 부러워요. For any verb that ends with 하다, for example, 좋아하다, 공부하다, etc., 하다 will conjugate as 해요. In some written text, you may also find 하다 conjugated as 하요. This has the same meaning. Next, the verb 되다 will conjugate as 돼요. 되다 can also conjugate as 돼요. This sounds slightly more formal, but has the same meaning. And next, the verb 이다, meaning to be, becomes 이에요 or 예요, depending on whether it follows a vowel or a consonant. After a vowel, it will become 예요, and after a consonant, it'll become 이에요. The 요 form can also be used in the future tense. If the verb stem ends with a vowel, attach a lir followed by 거예요. Or if it ends in a consonant, attach 을 followed by 거예요. Note that if the verb stem ends with a lir already, remove it first. Or if the verb stem ends with a piup, remove it and attach u first. For example, 가다 becomes 갈 거예요. 먹다 becomes 먹을 거예요. And 살다 becomes 살 거예요. Since 거예요 comes from 것 and 이다, this form can also be 것이에요. For example, 할 거예요 can also be used as 할 것이에요. And this same form can also be used in questions simply by attaching a question mark to the end. The 요 form can also be conjugated in the past tense. So to do that, you take a regular conjugated verb and attach this. For example, 하다 would conjugate as 해, so attaching this makes it 했어요. 가다 becomes 갔어요, 먹다 becomes 먹었어요, and 살다 becomes 살았어요. And this same form can also be used in questions simply by attaching a question mark to the end. For example, 했어요 can become 했어요. Alright, before I give you some final notes, try to do this quick quiz. You can pause the video here and then resume it when you're ready. Here are the answers. The first one is false. 존댓말 is not only used to refer to this regular 요 form. Next, typically a younger friend will speak more politely, and an older friend will speak more casually. And for conjugating these verbs to the regular 요 form, we have 다르다 becomes 달라요, 즐겁다 becomes 즐거워요, 길다 becomes 길어요, 좋아하다 becomes 좋아해요, and 크다 becomes 커요. And here are some final notes. Specifically, the 요 form itself is a part of the speech level 해요체. Now remember that this form, in any tense and usage, is considered to be informal. Now, informal just means it's not formal. The 요 form by itself is neither too polite nor too casual, and whether it sounds polite or not depends on how it's used. The standard 요 form, for example, 해요, can be used with anyone you're not close friends with, but should not be used in formal situations. For example, such as when you're giving a speech at a company. And this is because it's informal. To be safe, use honorific speech together with the 요 form whenever talking or asking questions about someone else who you're not acquainted with. And we will cover what honorific speech is and how to use it in a later lesson. Alright, that's it for this lesson. And in the next lesson, we're going to be covering even more about how to use the 요 form. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.